Hello, everyone, and welcome to Asian Viewpoints with Mary Sitt. Our guest today is Grace Talusan. She's the author of the memoir, The Body Papers, which won the 2017 Restless Books Prize for New Immigrant Writing for Nonfiction. She came over to this country at the age of 2 with her family from the Philippines. She has published essays, journalism, fiction, and book reviews for Creative Nonfiction, Brevity, Boston Magazine, and the Boston Globe, among many others. And she is currently the professor of nonfiction at Brown University. Thank you, Grace, for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's always good to see you.
Grace, I was reading through your book, and you write about traveling the country with your family in a green Chevy station wagon. Um, what was that like?
Um, it was fun. I mean, like we didn't have iPads and other things to distract us, so we really had to make our own entertainment in the car. And I don't think like people understand what that was like. You had to get really creative and just use whatever was around you. And also, because we were bored in the car for many hours, it would make my parents tell us stories about their lives. And that was also really special. So there's something like good about being bored, to bring out things in people that you wouldn't have access to otherwise.
And you talk about how your mom made this Filipino chicken and rice, and other families at rest stops were eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, potato chips, and you were embarrassed.
Oh, yes. Also, like they looked like they were enjoying what they were eating, and so that was probably part of it, is I wanted to be like the other, those American kids who are eating their sandwiches that are so
Right.
neat. They're coming out of a bag, and ours is messy. It's like you have to get a plate and then put the rice, and so just visually, I think their lunch looked better than ours, but
But you had better food.
I think so. I mean, like now that I think as an adult, it's like I know that chicken adobo is better than peanut butter and jelly for me.
Uh,
Um, so
so you settled in a England town with your family, and you went to a public school there, right? And
yes.
most of the people were white, the students, and you were one of the few brown faces there. Did you encounter racism?
I mean, I didn't know what to call it, but yes, and it wasn't. I mean, I don't want to dismiss things and say, oh, it's not severe. It's like it is what people would call microaggressions. And they're just things like little stings and things that would make me feel bad. And I didn't know why. So it wasn't like it was very overt. But of
You mean
course,
like what kind of things, Grace? Like name
well,
calling or just shunning you at the lunch
yes.
tables or what?
Oh yes. Yeah, yeah, like name calling. And the name calling, like everyone gets name called, right? Like in school.
Right,
But the name calling that I got was connected to my shape, my eye shape,
right.
right? So that's racial.
Same
And
here.
so,
That happened to me
yeah,
too. Yeah.
yeah. So it's things like that. So, I think that things have really changed. Um, in all kinds of ways, it's unacceptable to be picking on people for their various physical features and identities, I think. But I think a lot of it was plain ignorance and people not questioning their belief systems about how they think about quote unquote foreigners,
Right.
people who are not white Americans.
So you had some difficulties at school a little bit, and then at home, um, you also had some horrific things happening. Your grandfather made nightly visits to your room that left you confused and terrified. Can you talk about that? You do in your book.
Yeah, I mean, I write about it in the book. I don't write about it in detail. Like in that book, I'm mostly writing about the aftermath of it, which, I mean, the next thing that I'm working on is still kind of about that subject because there's ways that such a long experience of trauma and assault, it was 7 years of my childhood, almost every day. I mean, that's something that shapes a person. And
Mhm.
so I think I'm still trying to understand it, um, with the purpose of trying to not heal. I don't know if like what I think of that word even, but
Mhm.
just to understand who I am and to try to get better as much as possible. I'm not the same person. I'm not going to ever be that person who I would have been had this um assault not happened to me. But instead, I think I'm trying to figure out like how can I live the best that I can and enjoy my life as much as possible, given what I experienced. Um,
Grace, did you have anyone to turn to for help?
Not until later. I mean, I was just alone with it for a very long time. And then eventually, as I started to get older, I told my parents, then I got a therapist. And then from there, I started to make friends and, intentional friends who also had
Right.
experienced similar things, who were also on a healing journey.
You also later discovered there was a family history of cancer
Mhm.
and you took some preventative measures yourself. How did you deal with that?
It was very hard,
Mhm,
um, but I knew by then that I should reach towards community and information. And so
mhm,
I connected with a group called Force, and
mhm,
they're still around. They're a wonderful group. They have a conference every year. And that was a community where I found people who were going through it, as well as scientists, doctors, and this very well-informed, supportive community that helped me through my choices of what I wanted to do for myself, which was the preventative surgeries.
Grace, you've gone through a lot more than what other people have ever gone through. Um, how, when you went back to the Philippines with your husband, by then you were married,
Mhm.
and you looked at your ancestral home and experienced it again, did you learn something from that experience that changed the way you thought about your past?
I mean, definitely. Like that, my next project actually is all
Mhm,
about going back to the Philippines and looking and contemplating, like, what does it mean for me to have come from this place and for generations of my family to have come from this place and for my family to change that narrative by immigrating and
mhm,
moving. And I know that's the story of a lot of people who live in the US, some by choice, some because they're refugees, some they don't have a choice, like my husband's family, they were enslaved. There's all these different ways
mhm.
that we've come to this country, but I think it is profound to contemplate our past and who we might have been and the directions that our lives might have gone just by moving.
Grace, did writing this memoir about your family of origin change the way you think about them and change your relationships with them? Because you reveal a lot of deep, dark stuff in there.
So in I was afraid to write any of this stuff.
Mhm,
I thought I would lose everyone. I would lose the relationships. People would abandon me. People would
mhm,
be angry at me. And I just had to come to a point where I thought, well, I'm just going to have to risk that. And luckily, I'm going to knock on wood, like that has not happened. But
mhm.
I was at a point in my life where I was willing to lose everything because I thought that my goals for telling the story were more important than that. That's not the case for everybody, but for me, I just felt like I need to warn people about what's possible in a family. And so I've been lucky that my family relations have only strengthened from this, but that's
So
because I'm lucky.
that's good. Because that would be something really scary writing a memoir because you're sort of revealing a secret, at least from your perspective, and someone else in the family say, well, that didn't happen. That's not the way I saw it. And then
Yeah.
there's this whole conflict, but that didn't happen for you, which is good. Can you
No.
tell me why was it so important for you to write your memoir? Was it for like a catharsis for yourself, or was it really to, like you said, warn people of this is what I went through, you might be going through that?
It was all of it, you know, and the thing about catharsis is I think that there's ways that it was delayed for me. And sometimes when I'm giving a reading or doing an event where I reread my book out loud, I I then have the feeling. And then it might be a strange thing to say, but like just the way I'm made, maybe it's my trauma response is like things are delayed. And so sometimes my catharsis comes later, and like now. But in terms of warning people, I did feel that was very important. Like people in other books, other people had been brave enough to warn me about the possibilities of how people behave.
Mhm,
And I felt that was important to say, like, there's a narrative about family that a dominant narrative about how we treat each other. And then there's like what's really happening or what can happen. And I
mhm.
think I always want to live in the world of reality of what's possible. And this is what happened in my family. I
And
don't want,
Grace, I'm sorry, you're very courageous to tell that story, and especially in the Asian culture. You know, in the Asian culture, we don't talk about bad things. We don't talk about death. We don't mention funerals. We just don't because it's not right. It's not just superstition. You just don't do it. And if you
yes,
have any sort of issues, emotional, mental, anything, it's just quiet for
yeah,
generations, right? So
yeah.
it's really great that your family actually responded in a way that strengthened all the relationships instead of, divided it.
It might be the ways that we've all changed by becoming Americans and by the particular time in the US that we came of age. Like I'm including my parents in this
Mhm.
because, the conversations that people are having in the media and with each other, it shifted in my lifetime and made it possible for me to talk about these things and made it possible for people in my family to feel like, there's good evidence that it's better for us to talk about it than pretend it doesn't happen. And so I think that's what's helped.
Grace, you teach nonfiction writing at Brown University. If somebody wants to write a memoir, what would you say? What advice would you give that person?
Oh, I mean, I would say that memoir is based on memory. So you can write from your own experiences and memory. But I think that there's so much richness out there with archives, photographs, letters, field trips, maps, that I would very much encourage people writing memoir to bring in external materials to inform your memory and to be a kind of evidence that you write from.
Can everybody write a memoir, or do you have to have a certain bit of writing talent in there?
I mean, I think that some people have talents more than others. That's true. But I think all of us have to write because that's what we just have to do these days in with text messages, emails, whatever. And I also think that storytelling is something that humans do and have done for as long as there's been humans. We've told
Right.
stories. So I don't think this is something reserved for only a few people. I'm not saying that everyone's going to like publish their book and win a prize or something like that,
Like
but
you, your first memoir, boom,
you.
prize, congratulations.
Thank you. But I think, it's accessible. We can access this activity of telling stories and writing them down and sharing them with people. It's a human activity that we can all do if we want to.
What's your next book?
Well, we're still in conversations about it right now, but it should be coming out sometime in 2026, and it's
Okay.
another nonfiction book. Based on my life, but also using archives and travel. And, I'm hoping to, people who read my first book would enjoy this, but I hope to find other people too that might come to my work in a new way with this next book.
Well, Grace, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Oh, thank you, Mary. It's good. It's always great to see you.
Thank you. So you enjoyed this video, please click the like button below and be sure to subscribe to this channel. I'm Mary Sitt. I'll see you again in the next video.